Familiar like wounds. Chapter 1. The comfort of familiar pain. Why the human mind repeats what once hurt it. Most people do not realize they are reliving the same emotional story until they notice the ending never changes. Different faces. Different conversations. Different cities, relationships, friendships, workplaces. But somehow the emotional atmosphere remains strangely familiar. The same anxiety before a text reply. The same fear of saying too much. The same attraction to emotionally distant people. The same exhausting hope that this time, finally, someone difficult will become safe. Human beings like to believe they move forward logically through life. We tell ourselves we are guided by conscious choices, mature preferences, rational judgment. But beneath that story exists another system entirely older, faster, quieter, and far more powerful. The nervous system does not care nearly as much about happiness as it cares about familiarity. And that single fact explains a devastating amount about human behavior. It explains why people raised around emotional unpredictability often feel restless in healthy relationships. Why calmness can feel suspicious. Why emotionally unavailable people can feel magnetic. Why some people repeatedly abandon stability in exchange for emotional intensity they claim to hate. The brain is not always searching for what is good. Very often, it is searching for what feels known. The strange pull of emotional familiarity. A woman grows up with a father whose affection appears randomly. Some days he is warm, attentive, emotionally present. Other days he disappears into silence for reasons she never fully understands. She learns to monitor mood shifts carefully. She becomes highly perceptive, hyper-aware, emotionally adaptive. As an adult, she meets someone kind, available, emotionally consistent. And she feels nothing. No obsession. No adrenaline. No emotional urgency. The relationship feels flat. Then she meets someone emotionally inconsistent, warm one day, detached the next, and suddenly her entire nervous system activates. She thinks about them constantly. Replays conversations. Waits anxiously for messages. Feels euphoric during moments of closeness and devastated during emotional withdrawal. She calls it chemistry. But often, this is not chemistry. It is recognition. Her nervous system has encountered a familiar emotional climate and mistaken familiarity for connection. This happens constantly. Not because people consciously seek suffering, but because the brain associates familiarity with survival. As children, we cannot choose our emotional environment. Whatever love looked like early in life becomes the template the nervous system learns to identify as normal. Even painful dynamics can become psychologically comfortable simply because they are predictable. The mind adapts to environments long before it evaluates them. That is one of the most important truths in psychology. Why chaos can feel like passion. One of the most misunderstood experiences in modern relationships is the confusion between anxiety and attraction. People often describe emotionally unstable relationships with extraordinary intensity. I've never felt this strongly about anyone. They make me feel alive. I can't stop thinking about them. And sometimes that feeling is genuine compatibility. But sometimes it is a threat response wearing the disguise of romance. The nervous system becomes intensely activated around uncertainty. Will they text back? Are they losing interest? Did I say something wrong? Why were they distant today? Why do they suddenly seem cold? Uncertainty creates hyperfocus. Psychologically, intermittent reinforcement is one of the most powerful conditioning mechanisms that exists. Behavioral psychologists discovered long ago that inconsistent rewards create stronger compulsive attachment than predictable rewards. It is the same mechanism behind gambling addiction. Not knowing when the reward will arrive keeps the brain obsessively engaged. And emotionally inconsistent relationships operate in remarkably similar ways. When affection arrives unpredictably, dopamine spikes harder. The emotional high feels stronger precisely because the nervous system has been deprived beforehand. The relief becomes intoxicating. This is why emotionally chaotic relationships can feel impossible to leave even when they are deeply painful. The brain becomes trapped in a cycle of anticipation, reward, withdrawal, and craving. Many people are not addicted to the person. They are addicted to the emotional pattern. Childhood does not stay in childhood. People often imagine childhood memories as stories. But psychologically, childhood is more like programming. Long before we develop adult reasoning, the brain begins forming unconscious beliefs about love, safety, conflict, emotional expression, trust, worthiness, abandonment, closeness. Children are extraordinarily adaptive. If emotional needs are ignored, they learn not to need too much. If affection feels conditional, they learn to perform for love. If vulnerability creates danger, they learn emotional concealment. If unpredictability dominates the home, hypervigilance becomes survival. The problem is that survival strategies rarely disappear automatically in adulthood. They continue operating quietly beneath conscious awareness. A person who learned that love requires emotional chasing may later feel uncomfortable receiving stable affection without struggle. Someone raised around criticism may distrust kindness because criticism feels psychologically believable while gentleness feels unfamiliar. Another person may unconsciously sabotage healthy relationships because emotional stability creates a strange kind of vulnerability. There is no chaos to focus on, which means unresolved emotions finally become visible. Healing can feel disorienting partly because the nervous system initially experiences unfamiliar peace as uncertainty. People expect healing to feel instantly comforting. Very often, it feels emotionally unnatural at first. The brain prefers predictable pain. There is a deeply uncomfortable psychological reality most people resist confronting. The human mind often prefers familiar suffering over unfamiliar well-being. Not consciously. Not intentionally. But neurologically, predictability creates safety. Even painful patterns can feel regulating when they are known. This is why people remain in emotionally neglectful relationships, toxic family systems, exhausting friendships, self-destructive routines, burnout cycles, environments that quietly diminish them. The familiar may hurt, but at least it is understandable. Unfamiliar emotional territory requires psychological uncertainty, and uncertainty activates fear. A person leaving a toxic relationship often experiences not only grief, but disorientation. Without the emotional chaos they adapted around, the nervous system temporarily loses its reference point. Silence feels strange. Calmness feels empty. Stability feels suspicious. This is one reason people sometimes return to relationships they logically know are harmful. The nervous system is attempting to return to emotional familiarity, not emotional health. There is a difference. And understanding that difference changes everything. Why self-awareness alone is not enough. One of the most frustrating aspects of psychology is that insight does not automatically create change. A person can fully understand their patterns intellectually and still repeat them emotionally. Someone may know. They fear abandonment. They overthink relationships. They confuse intensity with love. They seek validation from unavailable people. And still feel powerfully drawn toward those dynamics. Why? Because awareness happens in the conscious mind, but emotional conditioning lives deeper in the nervous system. You cannot simply lecture yourself out of attachment patterns formed over years of emotional experience. The body must learn safety too. This is why healing often requires repetition, not revelation. Repeated safe relationships. Repeated emotional honesty. Repeated boundary setting. Repeated experiences of being accepted without performance. Repeated exposure to calmness without abandoning it. The nervous system changes through lived emotional experience, not intellectual insight alone. The fear nobody talks about. Many people say they want peace. But psychologically, peace can feel terrifying. Especially for people whose identities were built around emotional survival. When someone spends years managing chaos, reading moods, preventing conflict, earning affection, anticipating abandonment, calmness can initially feel emotionally empty. There is no emergency to solve, no emotional puzzle to decode, no instability demanding attention. And in that silence, people often encounter something they have avoided for years: themselves. Not the adaptive self, not the performing self, not the hypervigilant self. The actual self beneath survival mode. This is why some people unconsciously recreate chaos after periods of stability. Emotional intensity feels familiar. Stillness feels psychologically exposed. Healing is not only learning how to leave painful environments, it is learning how to tolerate safe ones. A small but life-changing realization. One of the most powerful moments in emotional growth happens when a person finally asks, "Does this feel good, or does it simply feel familiar?" That question alone can interrupt years of unconscious repetition. Because familiarity creates powerful illusions. It can make anxiety feel like love. Emotional distance feel attractive. Over-explaining feel necessary. People-pleasing feel virtuous. Chaos feel passionate. Emotional exhaustion feel normal. But emotional familiarity is not always emotional truth. Sometimes the relationships that heal us initially feel quieter than the ones that wounded us. Less dramatic. Less intoxicating. Less emotionally consuming. Not because they lack depth, but because the nervous system is no longer trapped in survival. And perhaps one of the hardest psychological lessons in adult life is realizing that healthy love often feels less like a fireworks explosion, and more like finally being able to breathe normally after years of forgetting you were holding your breath.